So Vida, lots for you to draw from here. If you want to, I had listed several different questions for you yesterday, but I'll give a few here. So how do you approach and discuss these issues in academia? What are you and others in academia doing to prepare students to be practitioners in this realm? And I have a few more, but they're bigger. So I'll say them. No, don't say them. I won't. Okay, we'll just stay with those.
So I rather to start with to get back a little to what do we mean and what do we want from decolonization? What is it? Decolonization, like why we all gather today to speak about decolonization. Well, there were several world events that happened around us. Maybe our awareness has increased, maybe the movements of human rights, or I would call it also life rights now. Some people rather to say not human rights, let's say, because human rights was related a lot, or the reference was always to the to the declaration, which is very unperfect. It's not perfect, the Universal Declaration for Human Rights, but it was at that moment maybe the right thing to do, or this is what the word reached to. So getting back to what is decolonization, it's about connecting, or it connects the contemporary racialized system that we see and the disadvantages with the wider historical process of colonialism and superiority of the colonial. And decolonization seeks to expose and transform these forms through new forms of collective reflection and action. And we have September 30 coming soon, which is great that Canada has dedicated a day to reflect and discuss these matters, to reflect on and discuss these matters. So, well, there could be many definitions and many approaches and many views on decolonization, but I just thought like to try to put something between brackets, if we can say what is decolonization, especially if we have learners in the audience today. And it's also about challenging and overturn forms of racialized disadvantages in every aspect of life, and maybe in higher education, because as I just said at the beginning, historically we are all familiar of residential schools. So this is one of the forms of how decolonization, of how education is used as a strong instrument for colonization. And as one of the panelists said, yes, colonial education and colonial approaches in international development, they reinforce power relations, whether within institutions or states. So it's global, it's inside the classroom, it's in the streets, it's in the market. So colonial education reinforce power relations, who have power, whose knowledge is important and related and appreciated and highlighted and presented, whether on TV or in the classroom or in the media, whose images do we see in the news, whose stories do we hear, whose stories in fact matter. So all of this because of the superiority of the colonial, which continues and still existing. Now, some people think, because everyone now we speak about colonialism and decolonialism, I mean, well, I remember I sometimes tell my students, like I immigrated to Canada 10 years now, but I was in North America forever. Because my education was basically in the United States. Well, the conversation in decolonization it is more, it's evolving, I would say. And we are still in the very early stages, so we are just now have it in our discussions and presentations like this presentation. So it's evolving. So the intensity of the discussion and the space and time we give for this discussion is getting better, not perfect, better. So this year we have, for the first time, the National Day. We have some conferences. I see some, events, discussions. So we have a long way to go. Okay, so decolonization is not just like we put a policy in paper, we have a panel discussion, and everything is perfect and we did our job. It's like something in style, or everything, like it's a hit for today. So it's a long process, and there is fear, and there is resistance, and there is anger against all of this discussion. Sometimes they express the fear, or we hear the fear expressed in a way like, are you saying that that you will, this is an attack on the quality of education? So this is sometimes the response comes, you want to add traditional knowledge, not modern knowledge. So these terms and these ideas comes from the fear of losing power eventually. So this is why we hear this attack on this discussion, or we cut the discussion in the middle. Which means like we do this, but we don't dare to go all the way in dismantling the systems of oppression. And like I was following the conversation on Ryerson, for example, and the attack on the president that happened. And I see the comments like, why people find it so difficult to undo some of the wrong things that we did it in the past. So this is how much, well, maybe this is simplification if I say how much colonialism is institutionalized, but to the extent that people who has nothing to do in this conversation in any form or way, they are against, for example, that move of Ryerson University. It's just an example, and I'm not part of Ryerson community. So, and I'm not in the middle of these discussions, so I don't have all the knowledge, but I'm giving you example on the fear of opening that door, okay? Ending racism and ending colonialism. So there is a lot of attacks, and to be honest, I appreciate and respect, like, every organization that dare to go openly and frankly to this conversation. Not many organizations dare to do so. Are you stopping me, Kim? Or I don't understand. So I should stop here?
You can just wrap up on this section. Maybe Vida, if on your last part, if you want to talk about preparing students.
Okay,
in this
I will
style.
talk about preparing students, and many of my students are here, by the way. So how I prepare students, one of the things that I like to do is to introduce my students to, as much as I can, to some of the scholars on that decolonize education, and like they read Kimberly Crenshaw, they watch her, they discuss her, Chimamanda. I always have students from Brazil, and sometimes I ask them about Paulo Freire. They don't have to read it, but I might ask about those scholars or bring them to the discussion. So this is in terms of what they read. And in every topic, like whether we are talking about SDGs, results-based management, etc., as much as I open like I, introduce introduce the skills of doing these things so they are successful in the field. I also encourage them to criticize these approaches, and if they have, or if they can think of alternatives or other ways to achieve what we achieve. Many of my students are international. I try, and they can, to the best that I can. I'm not perfect, but I try to open space for them so we learn about their countries, about their experience, about their problems or their country's problems. So I don't speak for, Bangladesh problem or Brazil problem. I'm open to hear from my students about those problems and solutions. So I try, if I can, not to reinforce the top-down approach, and encourage the bottom-up approach on doing things, whether it's in, problem definition, solutions, evaluations, program evaluations. So this is what I try to do when I can. Okay, thank you.
Thanks so much, Vida.